Yeah, yeah, I like that. You can't find a picture of him where he doesn't look cheerful, you know?
That's what has impressed me about him. And every time I heard him speak on television, the time we saw him at our church in California, I mean, he just exuded this wonderful, warm, cheerful, happy, grateful to be alive, everything. He just made
Yeah.
you felt happy just to be from him.
Yes, he just emanated it. I mean, it's very much like the Dalai Lama in that.
Yeah.
He and the Dalai Lama were friends.
Yeah. And they wrote this book together.
Yeah.
The Book of Joy.
Yeah. I read that one too. But it is quite amazing. I mean, everything he's been through in his life, he went through a lot of hardship, that's for sure. And yet to have and the things he saw and heard and dealt with, oh my gosh, just the worst parts of humanity.
Yeah.
And still he emanated this joy and happiness and forgiveness and lovingness that he emanated in practice was amazing. Really, truly amazing human being.
Yeah.
And I know he passed away just recently, right after I finished writing this course. I guess I shouldn't have finished it. But he, we had him for a good long time. He lived to a good old age, and he was definitely an asset to humanity. So anyway, we looked at African prayers, and we looked at apartheid, and now we're kind of doing a little bit of his biography, Desmond Tutu. And then after that, we're going to look at some of his writings and some of the things he said. So we get to the point where he and Nelson Mandela finally defeat apartheid. And now how do we deal with all of this horribleness that has been going on for about 40 years of oppression and segregation and severe extreme oppression of anybody who is not white, and classifying them in 3 different racial groups and shoving them off to different regional locations to control them and not allowing them to have a decent education or decent jobs. While it wasn't slavery, it functionally put them into a slavery type class that they could not escape from. And how they did this, and Desmond talked about, looking at other countries that have been through stuff like this, for example, the Nazis. And he talked about, some people wanted to do like a Nuremberg trials type thing. And Bishop Tutu fought against that. He said, we're not going to get healing if we do that. It's just going to be more, revenge. And then the next round of other people fighting back with their revenge. And, this is what happens in war. And, oh, hey, we have Jack's iPad. Lynn must be coming in. Let me send her.
Yes, I'm here. I've been here.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear you. I sent you a video invite to see if that helps you log in. It seems like most people have a hard time getting their video started lately.
No, I've got it. It's
good. Oh, okay. I just noticed you there.
We can't see you. Now
we
We
go.
can now, yeah.
Now we can.
okay.
Morning, Lynn.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
So,
Morning.
so what Tutu came up with in his committee, mainly this was his brainchild. It was called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, and about a year into they started talking about this right away, but it started actually running and doing its thing about a year into their new government, the new and improved South Africa that no longer had apartheid, and now is a very, very nice egalitarian country. And I tell you, after doing this class, I've never had any interest to go to Africa. If I went anywhere in Africa, I would love to see South Africa. Looks like a beautiful country, and they overcame so much. It's just amazing. So anyway, Desmond Tutu was the chairman of this committee that ran for a few years, and it was his brainchild. It's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where they actually heard the perpetrators would come in and tell their stories and try to find some way of finding reconciliation.
So who were they getting to come in? Like the,
People who committed horrible atrocities.
Hmm.
So, war crimes. Also, people who were victims. Both sides had their opportunities to come in voluntarily only. Nobody was ever forced to do it. And you'd be surprised how many thousands of people from both sides have come in and tell their stories of as victims, or tell their stories of how the horrible things they did in the name of the government. Naturally, almost all of them were regretting it. It was a catharsis for them. But I mean, we're talking about, murder, mass murder, torture, horrible things they did. And they would come in and admit it.
So was there a amnesty for people who did come in?
Yes, that was one of the keys to his thing. And that was one of the reasons it took a whole year to get it launched, is some people didn't want amnesty. But he insisted that if they're coming in and admitting these things, we have to grant amnesty. Otherwise, they're not going to come in and admit it. And the advantage to this, it at least gives peace to the family members. I mean, many of these were stories about people who didn't even know what happened to their family members, their sons and daughters or brothers or parents. They don't know. At least they know what happened.
oh my gosh.
And it allowed for some peace to happen, and it allowed for people who committed these acts to admit it. And pretty hard to seek forgiveness for some other kind of thing they did, but I mean that's part of the step of healing, is to confess that you did this horrible thing.
Tutu and
So both
Mandela, they didn't sit on these committees.
I'm
Hey,
sorry, what you said?
Rob, Tutu and Mandela didn't sit on these committees, did they?
Well,
Were they
Tutu,
part of listing.
Mandela didn't sit on it. He was busy running the government, but Tutu was the in charge of it,
Hmm.
Okay.
and he did sit on it, and he did hear all the stories. He was
Had
probably.
he and Mandela been friends before all this started? I mean, they knew each other.
You know,
The idea.
You could tell from his writings, he had always had a great deal of respect for Mandela. I don't know if they were actually friends prior to this. I know they became friends in this process, but whether or not he went to visit him in jail and got to know him, I don't know. He's prior to him becoming president, he spent like 40 years in prison, cracking open boulders with it. I mean, it was a hard labor prison camp.
Wouldn't have it done.
So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the jurisdiction included providing support and reparation to victims and their families, and compiling a full and objective record of the effects of apartheid on South African society. So that's another advantage to having this TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, is they could record the things that happen and have a much more accurate history and understanding of what happened than if they did not allow people amnesty for coming in and telling their story. Because you can be sure, most of those people would not have come forward. I mean, some people might still out of guilt, but a lot of people, for fear of reprisal, would not come in and tell what happened. And this was a way of really knowing the truth. And there are certainly advantages to a society to knowing the truth. It's a part of healing, of course, and it's a part of moving forward and building a better place. If you don't know what happened, it's hard to prevent it from happening again, whether in South Africa or other places.
Sort of like our January 6th committee.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Right. Where they want to suppress it all. We need to know what happened. Or like people that deny. That's why it's illegal to deny the Holocaust in Germany. I don't know how you can deny something that was so historically documented. But if you're if you live in Germany, you cannot deny the Holocaust. You'll have prison time. It's illegal to deny the Holocaust. We must remember those atrocities committed so that we don't commit them again. Or, in Turkey, where they deny the Armenian Holocaust,
Yeah.
there's no chance of any kind of, yeah, right. And they can do it.
That's
If you're
still
going to
an
deny it,
open wound.
denying it implies you want to do it again.
Yeah. But it's still an open wound there.
Yeah, it sure is. So in this committee, anybody who is a victim of violence was welcome to give his or her testimony for this body of people. And perpetrators could give evidence and request amnesty from prosecution.
It's almost, it is a religious thing. It's, the act of confession and
Yes,
I'm assuming atonement and, some form of, the amnesty also would be some pronouncement of
yeah,
absolution. I
Yeah.
can see what you were talking about, how it was cathartic for the people who were confessing.
yeah, you're absolutely right, Janice. It's very much a Christian model. Come and confess and get forgiveness and move on and try to heal. Not surprising that the Archbishop of South Africa is the one that designed this.
Yeah.
Basically designed it based on Christian principles. What would Jesus do? Right?
We should have something like that in our judicial system, shouldn't we?
No kidding.
Good thing.
If there were some way that people could express contrition and be forgiven.
Well, it's interesting you say that too, because in his books, Tutu talks about the Western way of thinking versus non-Western. And our way of thinking about justice is punishment, retribution.
Right.
Prove that you did a crime so that we can punish you or seek some sort of retribution. Whereas in the African model, it's about, let's find out what really happened so we can seek forgiveness and reconciliation. The end goal in their model was not retribution or retaliation or punishment. The end goal in their model was reconciliation and healing. So
And
the
they
end
had
goal,
to forge a country that could live together, people that
Right.
would be able to work and live together.
well, after everything they went through, they had to do it that way. Otherwise, it would just dissolve again into us versus them. And that's what they were worried about.
Yeah.
I wonder if our country will ever get to that point. Right now, it looks hopeless.
It does. It would take a major philosophical shift.
Can you imagine members of the Ku Klux Klan coming forward and taking off their bed sheets and confessing their
No.
horrors?
No, I can't imagine them changing their perspective enough to admit that it was horrible.
Yeah, exactly. These people that chased down that young man who was jogging through the neighborhood and,
Yeah.
Was this recent?
well, they've just been having the
Bond.
trial. They've been convicted.
Oh. It's horrible.
Ahmaud Arbery was the guy's name.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that case, right?
But they don't look a bit sorry.
No.
No. Oh, they really have racist ideas so deeply entrenched in their minds that they have no idea how horrible they are. So Minister Justice Dula Omar said this commission was a necessary exercise to enable South Africans to come to terms with their past on a morally acceptable basis and advance the cause of reconciliation. And like we were saying before, the primary objective was healing and forgiveness and reconciliation. So a place for retaliation, new society. So it's a very much different philosophical approach than what we have in the West. And like you were saying, wouldn't it be great if we did that?
Mm.
The work of the TRC was carried out about 3 committees. One was the Human Rights Violations Committee. They investigated human rights abuses that took place between 1960 and 1994. 1960 was when apartheid really took a really severe turn to the severity that it was. And of course, 1994 was when Nelson Mandela became president and apartheid was ended. So 34 years they had. And actually it went on longer than that. 1960s is just when it became really extremely oppressive. Apartheid really was already there for a couple of decades before that. This wasn't nearly as oppressive. Then the other committee was the Reparation and Rehabilitation Committee, charged with restoring victims' dignity and formulating proposals to assist with rehabilitation. And then the third committee was the Amnesty Committee. They considered applications for amnesty. So it wasn't automatic. They'd come and tell their story. But in most cases, they granted it. They had to do that in order to instill confidence in the people who would confess. They knew that amnesty was likely. So they'd be willing to keep coming forward. But it wasn't just automatic. You come tell your story and you can leave the building forgiven and without possible trial. But like I said, in most cases, and they were horrible stories that were told. In most cases, they were granted amnesty. Because you know what, they still had to go live with themselves. They had to tell their stories and go integrate back in the community somehow. And there certainly were cases where they were probably never able to do that once people knew who they were and what they did. So the commission was empowered to grant amnesty to those charged with atrocities during apartheid as long as 2 conditions were met. First, the crimes had to be politically motivated. So it's not just any racial crime. There's a political motivation behind it. And the second is that person seeking amnesty required to tell the commission the entire and whole truth about their involvement. So before granting amnesty, they would make sure they would really evaluate and investigate these stories, make sure they sounded consistent and true and consistent with other facts, and assess whether or not there was truly a political motivation behind it.
How do you determine political motivation? Like following a law?
What's that?
Like following a law?
Or were you instructed to do it by some political leader, or is there some gain for the apartheid system by you? Is it perpetrated against someone who's fighting for freedom? I'm sure there's a lot of ways you can look at that, and I'm sure some of it's subjective. But if the person just was a racist who hated their black neighbor, you might say, well, where's the politics in that? This is racism. Because I'm sure there were people out there that took advantage of the corrupt system, like KKK people,
Yeah.
Go ahead and kill some black people because no one's going to do anything to me anyway.
And the abuse of young black women. But that was forbidden by the law, however, to have miscegenation. So that would be a secretive and hateful rape,
Yeah, I'm
above and beyond.
Sure, it still happened, but right.
Yeah.
One was exempt from being charged. Ordinary citizens, just like members of the police, could also be arraigned. Most notably, members of the ANC, the ruling party at the time of the trial, could similarly be charged. So there were 7,112 petitioners. Out of those 7,112 petitioners, 5,392 people refused amnesty.
What happened to them? Were they then charged and
Yeah,
prosecuted?
right. So I guess I was wrong when I told you the majority were granted amnesty. Apparently the majority were not. 849 were granted amnesty.
So how would they get them to come forward to speak then in those cases? Maybe somebody, identified someone and brought charges against them somehow. And then
Yeah.
they had to come forward.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, and this process lasted for a few years, so there were probably a lot of open cases being investigated.
So these people that were denied, did they follow the rules and come forward and testify? And then they said, no, it's not qualified to tell their truth?
I think at that point they would have to. They were compelled by the law of the new government.
So that was a risk for a lot of people to come forward and
Yeah,
tell their truth and find out, well, that doesn't qualify. We're going to prosecute you.
yes.
Were there white people in the new government, David?
Yes. It was a fairly even mix.
So if, let's say, if you had 10 million people, I'm just making up a number, 10 million people in the country, from the beginning of this to the end, did many of the Caucasian or the white people leave the country, or do we know?
I don't think so. I mean, there's probably some that did, but I don't think so. People had their businesses and their livelihoods and their farms.
Wasn't a large number.
Was that?
It wasn't a large number
No.
that left.
No, and it was about, in South Africa, it was about 30% white. So the majority was non-white.
Well, Mandela, he came in and pushed this amnesty issue and let's not have retribution. So maybe a lot of the people felt a little safer in staying than leaving.
Right.
I would imagine if there was a wholesale retribution and everything else, then a lot of people would have fled.
Yes, right. Yeah, I agree with you.
But with all these people that were denied, it's a wonder that people still came forward.
It is. And some people are going to just want to get it off their chest and absolve their guilt by confession and take whatever's coming to them. There are people that are, get to the point where it's like, I don't care what punishment I get, I need to confess this and get it up. It happens in our society too. Not everybody is totally without a conscience, and eventually that catches up with them, the horrible things they did to people. I don't know how many applications were withdrawn. I just read somewhere that a number, and all this is mostly from Tutu's books, sometimes other sources too, news sources. I'm not sure a number of applications withdrawn. I don't know what number, but apparently some people decided it wasn't worth the risk because they knew it was not, they weren't going to meet the criteria.
Or that they had done something so horrible that it wasn't going to be forgiven.
Yeah. And so the proceedings brought forth many witnesses to give testimony about the secret, immoral, and violent acts committed by the apartheid government and the liberation forces. Because the people fighting back against apartheid also committed atrocities. I think it's a bit like Palestine versus Israel. I mean, the magnitude is very different, but they fought back with violence too. So both sides were investigated, not just the apartheid government. And finally, in 1998, See, when did this start? It was I did back up here.
94.
94, so 4 years. Yeah, I knew it went on for a few years. So 94 to 98, so 4-year program here. In 1998, the commission presented its report condemning both sides for atrocities committed. The hearings made international news and many sessions were broadcast on national television. You know, I have to admit, I don't, of course, 1998, I was in medical school, so I don't know anyone else saw it.
Yeah.
When I got out of medical school, I was amazed by all the movies and music and TV shows that I never heard of. But do any of you all remember? Do any of you all remember any of this stuff being on the news?
Yeah,
Vaguely.
I remember, because now this sounds really stupid, but when Nelson and I got engaged, I did not want a diamond ring because I felt that all diamonds were somehow related to
South Africa.
this atrocity, and that as long as Mandela was in prison, that you know, he was the symbol of the oppression. And when he was released, that's when I got my first little diamond, a beautiful little diamond
Oh,
ring.
no kidding. Well, that's
But
great.
Those styrofoam rings don't last very long.
But at least they float.
I really admire your fortitude on that and your, oh golly, I can't think of the
Yeah,
word for that.
Principles.
Yeah, the principles are just very admirable.
well,
Yeah.
you know, it was, you know, it was pretty naive because, you know, clearly it was not really related to the specific. It was just my little protest in my own way.
Exactly, but that means a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, God sees that.
Yeah, well, he also sees motivations and arrogance and a whole bunch of other stuff too. So
Yes, of course,
anyhow,
of course.
but those were the days, and I do remember that. And I remember that Mandela was kind of the symbol of what was being done to the whole country. Yeah,
Yeah.
not just, Nelson was saying not just South Africa.
Yeah. Hope and reconciliation and renewal, starting over, right?
Yeah.
Sort of a recap, David. The country before there was a government before apartheid was instituted. Is that correct? I mean, what kind of government did they have before they formally instituted apartheid?
Yeah. You know, I'm not really sure
No.
because there were apartheid laws started as early as 1914. There were laws leading towards apartheid, you know, separation. It was a thing that developed over decades. You know, it was only, became more pronounced in the 40s and then the 1960s strong. So it was something that developed over time, got stronger and stronger. The enforcement of the laws, the severity of the laws. So you'd have to go back to like pre-1914 to see what South African government was. And honestly, I don't know. It was occupied by Great Britain, right? So
Dutch.
or the Dutch. I'm not sure on the years on that. It was occupied by the Dutch first, and then by Great Britain.
Do we know if Union of South Africa was involved in World War II? Did they participate in the fighting, or do you know?
I don't know.
They were not the North Africa portion that was being swept by the Nazis.
Oh yeah, no, it was too far away.
Yeah, this was,
You have the whole continent away. I mean, you know, yeah, Hitler never made it that far. I mean, Hitler was basically trying to do the Roman Empire over again, which included North Africa. I mean, you know, the Third Reich means the Third Reign. So Hitler was referring to the Third Reign of the Roman Empire. That's where the word Third Reich comes from. He literally was trying to recreate the Roman Empire.
I guess the first Reich was the Roman Empire. What was the second Reich?
I think he was referring to the Holy Roman Empire, which was, you know, the medieval days which was neither holy nor Roman.
True.
Because Rome was only part of the Holy Roman Empire for part of it. Eventually, Rome fell out of it, and it was still called the Holy Roman Empire. Even it was mostly Germany and France and some of the other European mainland countries.
Probably had a few Latin words in their rules or something.
Yeah, right. Let's see here. Oh, I'd like to throw in a picture once in a while because,
Ooh, gorgeous.
yeah, this is a port in a town called Umhangla, which is outside of Pretoria. Johannesburg. It's outside of it's a little town outside of Johannesburg.
It's like the rib cage of an animal.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
Whale.
Yeah,
Oh,
whales
wow.
are,
In the process of looking things up, I have found so many amazing pictures of South Africa that I decided to throw them in here and there randomly.
That is beautiful.
It's a beautiful country, yeah. Breathtaking. So
Oh, now look.
moving on from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which by the way, he retired from his position as bishop and immediately went into Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And then after that, continued to be involved on global human rights issues. So in 2006, he was part of a committee investigating Israeli bombings in the Beit Hanun incidents in 2006, which I don't remember. But during the fact-finding mission, Tutu called the Gaza blockade an abomination and compared Israel's behavior to the military junta in Burma. Because I know in our country it's very unpopular to criticize Israel, but they have committed definite atrocities. It's the Gaza Strip and Palestine. 2008 to 2009, Gaza war, Tutu called Israeli offensive war crimes. Also became very involved in climate change, calling it one of the greatest challenges of humanity. Involved in the forefront of campaigns against the AIDS virus, which of course it was very bad in Africa. Still is. He's very defensive of homosexuality rights. In his writings, he despairs the huge amount of time and energy wasted on discussing the issue within the church. There should be no discrimination against people of homosexual orientation.
So he became active in the church again then as a bishop, is that correct?
What's that?
Did he become active in the church? He picked up the bishop's scepter and started playing that role again?
Well,
Or did he
you know,
ever come back for him?
I don't think he ever came back to official position as bishop, but he continued to be extremely active on a global level, standing up for all kinds of human rights and involved in international, events, and his opinion and statements were still highly revered and respected as a retired bishop. And he's a unique individual. Being retired bishop is one thing, but everything else he did, the apartheid committee and everything he did, he definitely has a unique voice in history with everything he had been through. He has some credibility that, You know, no one else could have that kind of credibility on these kind of things. In regards to homosexuality, he quoted, Jesus did not say, if I be lifted up, I will draw some. Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all. All black, white, yellow, rich, poor, clever, not so clever, beautiful, not so beautiful. It's one of the most radical things. This is from one of his sermons.
Got it.
It's love.
Right,
Love does not discriminate.
right. So we know he was the first Black person ordained as a South African Anglican Archbishop, Cape Town. He's, of course, given many awards, include the Gandhi Peace Prize in 2007, the Albert Schweitzer Prize for Humanitarianism, the Machiavelli Prize for Liberty in 1986. And these are a list of his publications. So he wrote many books.
The rainbow people of God.
And with, you know, writing not that long ago, up into his old age. After Mandela passed away, Tutu became increasingly critical of the ANC leadership, believing they wasted opportunities to create a better legacy to end the poverty endemic in many Black townships. He's one of the patrons of the Forgiveness Project, a UK-based charity which seeks to facilitate conflict resolution and break the cycle of vengeance and retaliation. Honorary doctor of a number of leading universities in the USA, Britain, and Germany. He formulated his objective as a democratic and just society without racial divisions and set forth the following points as minimum demands: equal civil rights for all, abolition of South Africans' passport laws, which they did, of course. Those were the laws where if you were Black, you had to carry paperwork with you to cross various regions. Common system of education, cessation of forced deportation from South Africa's so-called homelands. All right. And I know it's getting close to church time, so we're going to end it. Here's the Eastern Cape Valley of Desolation.
Wow. That's a sad name for what
I
seems to be
know, isn't it?
beautiful.
Is that like the Badlands?
Yeah, probably,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Desolation, wow.
Here's a little town called Hermanus. It's a port town. Another picture of Hermanus. And here's a hotel in Hermanus. I would like to stay there. The
Yeah.
Birkenhead Hotel House.
Ooh.
What do you like to stay in that? for?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That looks like it's that little individual swimming pool because
Yeah. Yeah.
look at the
Next-
size compared to those loungers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not very big, yeah. I looked it up, but I don't think any of us can afford to stay there.
Oh, shucks.
Just imagine lying on those loungers looking at that. Oh, gorgeous.